flushes up immediately, we're going to move on to item number 1, which is consideration of ordinance 2023-28, an ordinance to rezone 7.88 acres from civic institutional to residential R4 district for the property located south of Battle Avenue and west of Cannon Street, currently addressed as 1406 Cannon Street, 319 Battle Avenue, 401 Battle Avenue, 403 Battle Avenue. Established a public hearing on October the 10th. Oh, thanks for reminding me. Vice Mayor?
Present.
Alderman Blanton? Absent. Alderman Hanson? Absent. Alderman Peterson? Alderman Berger?
Present.
Alderman Brown?
Present.
Alderman Potts?
Present.
And Alderman Baggett? And the mayor's here. Okay. We're ready.
Great. Well, like the mayor said, this is a rezoning from CI to R4. It is 4 properties. The Envision Franklin for the area supports contextual development. The zoning of the area is R4, and so staff supported the rezoning as the planning commission. I can answer any questions.
Any questions? We welcome Robert Blair from the Franklin Special School District Board. You want to make any comments, Robert, or seem like the board's pretty understanding of what's going on here? They have very good representatives. Seeing no questions, we'll continue to move forward. Item 2 is ordinance 2023 to rezone 104.07 acres from Civic Institutional District to Plan PD 207,500 district for property located south of McHatcher Memorial Parkway, west of Daniel McMahon Lane. Established a public hearing October the 10th, 2023.
Yes, this item and item 3 go together. It's a rezoning and development plan revision. The goal is to build an EMS station at the end of Aldersgate Way, which includes the additional square footage you see there. It's inclusive of the entire Franklin First United Methodist PUD that was originally approved in 2005, and now it includes the EMS facility.
And I assume you represent the church. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. My name is John Gore. I'm with Bard Civil Associates, civil engineering. We appreciate everybody's time today. We've worked through some site plan changes in the last month based on some feedback that we got previously that mostly involved the road that kind of goes to the west. To the vacant property that's to the west of the EMS station to make provisions if that property develops so that there's plenty of room for, like I say, a roadway to be extended. And there was some parking that was off of the roadway that you guys asked us to move off of the roadway, which we've done. So, like I say, we appreciate the feedback. We are in support of the conditions and be glad to answer any questions that the group has.
And this is adjacent to the 53 acres owned by the city water management utility.
What specifically was changed for the road access?
It's in one of the conditions of approval. I'd have to pull it up to see, but we designated where right-of-way would be. So before it was just an access easement, they're going to be dedicating right-of-way, and we looked at that cross-section to make sure that it met our standards.
It was widened. It was pulled a little bit to the south so that there could also be a sidewalk extended on the north side of that drive. And then there was some head-in parking that was off the drive that's been pulled into the site so that you don't have
Okay.
people long-term backing into the drive.
That was my question. Thank you.
Yep.
Everybody good to go? And I'll read item 3, which we just described, which is a development plan for the same property. And unless there's some comments on that, we'll continue to move forward. Special, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I just want to know, what are the uses on that still? Is it changed at all, or is it still the same use, institutional or civic institutional, all uses?
It's going to be a PUD. So the previous zoning was CI. It's changing to a PD. So it's just the church and its uses that are included in that PUD originally, plus the EMS facility.
Okay.
Item 4 is special event permit for Centennial High School Homecoming Parade in Cool Springs on September 29th, 2023.
This is the typical event. It's on both agendas so that we can get your approval tonight and not get it 3 days before the parade.
I'll just say that I'm excited to have that on the agenda as a former Centennial athletic chair and also current dad of two at Centennial.
This is a big day for homecoming parades. In the late morning is Franklin High Schools through downtown, and in the afternoon is the Centennial Parade. So lots of homecoming parades on September 29th to meet those needs.
Any other questions? Item 5 is City of Franklin Contract 2023, thank you, Monique, 0201 with Franklin Housing Authority for the reimbursement of $300,000 in Community Development Block Grant funds for the cost of infrastructure within Cherokee Place.
Good afternoon, all. This is a request for $300,000 to work on the Cherokee portion of the FHA development. This development will have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for a total of 76 new units. This is CDBG funds and has been allocated for public infrastructure. Any questions?
Y'all are an easy bunch tonight.
I'll just say thank you very much for the work that you put in on this. I know that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes in, serving on the Housing Commission and working and partnering with you all the time. So thank you very much for everybody involved.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think I'm going to stay put because I think I'm next
Okay,
too.
we got another one. And this is 76 affordable units, too. This is specifically meets that need in the community. And they're new units.
Yes.
And you might get the idea that Kathleen has something to do with CDBG money. But, so we'll go to item 6, which is City of Franklin Contract 2023-0219 between the City of Franklin, Columbia State Community College for the reimbursement of up to $81,000 in Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funds in consideration of expenses incurred to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19.
And this is a continuation of a program where the City of Franklin partnered with Columbia State to create a certified clinical medical assistant program. It has had a 90% success rate, and we had some funds left, and Eric and I, the mayor and Tom, this is a really good use of those funds.
And this is also on both agendas because the term is underway and we want to get these dollars plugged in as soon as we can at Columbia State. And as Kathleen said, it's been a very successful allocation and we had some additional funds that could go towards it. And glad to answer any other questions you might have.
We may slow down a little bit now. Consideration to deny sanitary sewer for 2051 Wilson Pike and a discussion on the urban growth boundary and a request for guidance to move forward in Mays Creek Basin.
Great. So I think staff's going to present some context on this, and then I know Mr. White, and he may have some other folks with him also to speak to their concerns or perspective related to this. We did present on this several meetings ago, and then deferred further discussion at the applicant's request to this meeting. We want to walk through some updated information and sort of a recommendation to move forward with work that's going on related to this broader basin. And then I'm also glad to hear from Mr. White and
Is he here?
other folks. I assume he's here, but he told us he would be here, but we can go ahead and do our thing, and if he arrives,
He'll arrive
go
in
from there.
style.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Take it away, Scott. Start off.
All right. So we wanted to kind of go back through the presentation at a more high level, just to refresh your guys' memory from the last meeting, which I believe was in June. This is a property. It's approximately 116 acres outside the city limits in the Mays Creek Basin. It's on Wilson Pike, bordered by that on the north and North Chapel Road on the west. Our basin plan has future interceptor crossing the property. As you see, as a reminder, it's the purple lines. That red outline is the actual parcel. Go next. They first came in here and wanted denial of sewer. I think there was a little bit of confusion between the applicant and the engineer on what they initially applied for as far as the 23 homes. They're still discussing and not 100% sure on what they actually want to do with the property, to my understanding. But bottom line is they want to develop the property. They want denial of sewer. to the next slide. And that's just an overall look at the Mays Creek Basin. Again, the purple lines are the future interceptors as put forth by the basin plan that was adopted. That's red parcels, their property. Next one. So we can skip this next one. It's basically, the basin is about 9,900 acres. Our basin plan was updated and dates back to at least 2006, updated 2013. Go to the next slide. And we talked at the last meeting about previous requests within the basin. One of the things that I wanted to bring up again is that we had recommended a solution when the Smiths came in of a temporary regional pump station and associated force main. That alignment had not been determined yet. It was just an option of getting a regional pump station that could be relocated down the basin as new development came in. So we're going to look at the exhibit for that later. But the Mays Creek study that we're working on right now, the basin update, will probably flesh out our options a little bit more. So next slide. So we came in June recommending approving sewer with them extending the infrastructure to serve it. But the reason for that is this accounts, they would prevent approximately 1,246 acres from accessing sewer if we denied this property, because the infrastructure does go through the subject's property. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And we had looked at, we had recommended reduction of the urban growth boundary previously. And part of that was that as properties like this one are denied sewer, it impedes our ability to follow the approved basin plan and plan for future growth. So after the last meeting, the applicant, Mr. White, emailed city staff and made some statements that we wanted to kind of address with the board. So the applicant began discussions with the county on this property before seeking availability through the city of Franklin in our usual process. So, he's stated that he's been working with this for a long time, and he's gotten a lot of information, I believe, from the county that was not necessarily accurate or doesn't reflect our actual process. They suggested that his requests would be routinely denied. City staff has always maintained that BOMA makes the decision. We make a recommendation, but we can't confirm or tell anybody what the outcome is going to be. The applicant has been discussing decentralized sewer systems. It's our understanding that the county does not permit those anymore for residential use. It's only, I think, civic and institutional. That's our understanding, at least. The applicant in that email suggested that the city's existing sewer treatment facilities are at capacity and overwhelmed, which is not the case. There's capacity at the existing treatment plant for this. And the planned future south plant will be well positioned to take on these flows once that's constructed. The applicant believes the city keeping the Mays Creek Basin in the UGB is contrary to Tennessee Code Annotated 6-58-106. This is a quote from the applicant, which only permits the inclusion of land in which the city is identified to be areas that would be provided full metropolitan services within the next 20 years. And the UGB was developed in 2003. So a basin plan was, like I said earlier, a basin plan was prepared for the Mays Creek area in 2006 and updated in 2013. And that's where the purple lines came from. It's showing basically following low-lying areas to gather as much sewer from areas as possible. They're lines on a map at this point. So we're working to actually update those basin plans now. We've engaged the services of a consultant to do that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I talked about the potential option. If we can get that zoomed out a little bit. So the interim solution that we had proposed for the Smith property, if you look at those highlighted parcels there, the red dashed line coming from those, there would be a pump station located on the western edge of that line. And that red dashed line represents kind of the potential force main going back to existing city gravity sewer. that kind of catches us all up on everything. But what we're recommending is deferring this decision until we've had time to get this basin plan developed and further fleshed out to see just how this property being sewer denied will impact the rest of the system, get a better idea of the sewer layouts and the profiles, the depth of sewer, and just kind of get more than just lines on a paper and figure out how this is going to impact everything. The basin plan update is expected to be complete in February 2024, and we would hope to present that to you guys probably March 2024 to get input from you. And so we really just want to kind of take a step back, get this basin plan updated, readdress it at that time.
In providing that update does give us a better sense of where key collector lines need to be and how we lay this out. The key part of this is that 22% of that basin hinges on how we handle this property. And so it's not just about how we work with Mr. White, it's how we project working with other property owners that might be in that same area. And without an updated basin plan, we're not going to be able to best problem solve that for him and for other property owners. So that's really what we're asking for at this stage. And it is a little more complex because it does impact a pretty significant chunk of that basin and of properties that we know have been and are likely to explore annexation in the future. So we're trying to keep options and open for everybody involved, and that's why that's such a key part of our recommendation and why it might be premature to make a call right now. And Mr. Weiss talked to us some about alternative systems. We need to understand that we've got additional responsibilities potentially under state law that we would need to understand as well. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and it's probably not ripe for a decision, in our opinion, until we get to do that basin plan update in particular and maybe better understand how he may want to approach his property. Anything else from our side?
Well, does Mr. White understand what we're doing?
We have shared this with him, yes.
Yeah, we
We've
met with
shared
him
it
last
with you,
week.
okay?
Yeah.
And told him, we're wanting to wait and see what this basin plan shows. We met with him and discussed it Friday? Yeah, Friday.
Yeah, so
And we've had ongoing discussions with him for some time too.
correct. That's what I was going to add. Is we've tried to keep him updated and be as upfront with him as we can. Unfortunately, his property came up when we started. We were in the early stages of starting the basin update, so the timing is not a good time. But the intent with that basin update is not just lines on a paper. So this next update that we're doing, we're actually going to have preliminary profiles and layouts where the actual sewer will go, and it will show us as we progress and plan for the future how we will actually serve these properties and not just a shaded line on a sheet of paper. And so when the Smiths came in, what we essentially did was we looked at, there's a large portion a little bit south that interceptors have to be extended, and most of that is really county property that's not going to flip anytime soon, or at least we don't think so. So we wanted to look at it and see what makes sense to be able to serve the area, and that's where we came up with kind of a West Haven model of a basically large lift station with a force main. So we're working through that, and that update that we're doing should have some pretty straightforward information that we can share.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts, then I got Alderman Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you could toggle back to slide 11, the one before this, I just had a minor question, but I was thinking along the lines of, you talk about planning for the future. And I don't want to get into all the engineering specs, but why would we have all 24-inch pipes and then in the dead center, the one that's going east is an 18? And I'm asking only thinking about future growth that's going that direction. Is there any reason for that?
No, not at this time. Really, that's more of just a kind of a basic layout.
Okay.
We would have to look at all the projected flows and then size accordingly.
Okay.
But those sizes are not completely accurate. That's just more representation.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not undersizing pipe now and then going to have to come back and redo it later.
Yeah, I think this is pretty preliminary, and once a project was actually committed to doing this, then, you know, their engineers would be calculating this and looking at the densities and working with planning and doing all that to make sure it's sized correctly.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Alderman Berger.
Thank you. We've needed this for a long time, and we've talked about it. So this update is way overdue, and thanks for working on this. I think we're right. I think we need to hold off until we have the study because we desperately need to know what we're doing out there and how all this plays out. Because with 96, 4 and 5 lane highway out there, we know there's going to be a development. And most of that development is going to be along the road. It's not going to be totally back into the rural areas because we want to protect those rural areas and not get back into those rural areas. But along that 4-lane highway, along 96, we're gonna see development come, and rightfully so. I mean, that's where it belongs. It doesn't belong back into the rural sections. So when we're looking at that, we need to be thinking about how that develops along 96 versus going back in further into the far reaches of the UGB or any of the county. I really don't want to disturb that rural protecting area. The other thing is alternative sewer systems. I don't know what's happening in the last 5 years, if we have any other nuances or things that are coming available to us. Of course, you talked about the alternative, the large lift station, of course, Maine. But I'd be curious what is happening in the world of technology with our alternative sewer systems. So if you want to inform us what alternatives are there, because that might be used. I know people will talk about doing a certain development and putting in the infrastructure for the sewer, and so you just switch over to it when the sewer is available years later. But at the same time, this whole area, and I think we all need to remember this, we're talking about protecting more of the rural areas. Even though we're going to have this infrastructure along 96, we also need to be looking at more, and the planning department will need to pay attention to this too, more development and not shortchanging the east side of Franklin on that. We're doing these things and we're thinking through these things on the short property and some other places. Let's carry this over to the east side and help protect some of this land and do more developments. Those things can be done. We know they can be done well, and they can also be compacted as well. And where you're not going to reach out and destroy a lot of land, but you're going to compact the development. But it's more development. So I just want to put that out there while you're doing it.
We met with some people recently to talk about some newer technology, I guess, on decentralized systems. And so we're kind of looking into those from a technical standpoint and also from a staffing and you know, all the implications of it. We do probably anticipate at some point we're going to want to come to you with some
I'm sure.
presentation or something, because I know people are going to be pushing for them, and we want to make sure that that we know all the ins and outs and the pros and cons, and that we can present that so that you guys do as well.
Because we need that. We need to know what the pros and cons of all those systems are and which ones are really up to date with new technology and allowing us to really serve it in the best way possible. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Alderman Brown.
Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, at least, a lot of these have been smaller. They've been on the fringes. They've had little impact around. This one, pretty significant impact to future growth, and it's a huge segment right in the middle of that. So I think it's reasonable to take some time, do the due diligence, and do it right. I agree with your comments about what I think happens on the northern and western edges of this and more rural, but we certainly don't want to cut ourselves off this early. I guess one question, I'm trying to interpret because we haven't heard from him, but his desire is just to move more quickly. We're proposing that we might have a solution to get there a little faster than not, but that's part of what we're asking for, is give us a chance to see if we can get there quicker than what we would normally plan.
Yeah, because I think the updated basin plan is going to do something that the other basin plans didn't really necessarily do, and that's think of interim solutions and phasing and things like that, because the basin really should be developing from where the existing sewer is up into the basin, and as those pieces of land develop, the pipe should be extended further and further, and it's not the way the requests are coming in. They're coming in at the top of the basin.
Right.
So with that being what's happening, I think the basin plan is going to address that and see, what are some alternatives, some interim options, some phasing, how that would all work.
But,
One of the things-
but timing is his driver. It's not, there's no other driver to his desire here.
It seems so.
Okay.
And one of the things I think we'll want to think about is when we have that basin plan, are there elements of, primary main interceptor lines that make sense for us to build in advance potentially to help facilitate that and get recaptured down the line as we kind of look at how does that sync up with potentially a South Plant coming online in the next 10 years, and how do you maybe align collection system for areas with the new treatment capacity as well. So those are things to think about. It's a little different. What can we expect development to do? What can we do and maybe recapture? What does that look like? Those are all things that I think we can have a better sense of with the updated plan too.
Alderman Baggett?
I do think it brings up a good point, though, because I'm in favor of pausing as well and do the plan, but it is an interesting thing to think about because we just kind of had a similar situation in the UGB discussion in South Columbia where the board's desire was for a more county-like, density development, and we're kind of forced because of sewer to choose one municipality or it was an interesting conversation. I think that having more tools in our toolbox to allow for the type of development that he is desiring to do while not impacting our plans for the basin, that is an interesting concept. I do think, and I think I'd be very interested to hear some of our alternatives because I think we'll have more of this where you'll have people desire to develop, do something with their property in 1 per 5 acres or whatever, and we need to think about how we can accommodate that, but also not, the 1,200 acres that this would cut off is significant, and it's not fair to those property owners to deny them the right to do something with their property. It's also interesting to note that our new Envision Franklin plan, which I think this is a big difference maker with, keeping this in the UGB, first of all, per the additional information you showed, but the Village Green concept is adjacent to his property, and one could assume that then that's something new, that it hasn't been there before. And that Village Green concept might actually get sewer there. It could, and so it's a great time to do this because of that Village Green concept out there, which does preserve 70% of the open space in that concept. To your point, Alderman Berger, and maintaining rural character. So I think there will be some more activity out here, and I think thanks to our Envision Franklin refresh or rewrite, whatever you want to call it, I think the timing seems to be right because you're right. We're going to see some of these areas where the Village Green concept, in other areas of town as well, more rural in nature, maybe sewer's not there. How do we allow that, or how can we get that done, that development, if they want to get it done? Because that's preserving 70% of the rural character, and that's what I think we've heard from the citizens they want. So I am good with pausing, but I do think it's closer than the current plans might reflect that sewer would be coming out there based on Envision Franklin. So it's great timing. I think the timing is right to do it, and the sooner the better.
I think, what you're talking about with all the open space and everything, I think that kind of, wanting to preserve that kind of feel and that area kind of leads you back to the point of the city having some involvement because it's density that pays for the sewer. So that kind of brings you back.
The Village Green concept allows density.
Right.
So that's that concept allows for density in the 30%. The idea being that it would be enough to pay for the infrastructure as well. So it looks different than a traditional development, but that we've seen here in Franklin. But this is great timing because y'all can think through those calculations to achieve hopefully the plan that. But you're right, that's what pays for it. And so great time to make the math work or figure out if the math's going to work.
We've got, go ahead, Alderman Peterson. We do have Mr. White here now, so.
Thank you. We are also not considering enough, I think, tonight about how Murfreesboro Road 96 is, they're doing so much work on the road there, and that makes it different from, even, going down Columbia Avenue, or Columbia Highway, because there's just so much being done to change the road there that I think that's going to make a difference in what other things might be, some other developments might be interested in coming to this particular area compared to some of the others that we've talked about. So I think we need to kind of keep all of this involved. And in fact, I haven't driven out there lately, but every time I do, I'm thinking, oh my goodness,
Okay. Well, we do have Mr. White here now, so we had told Mr. White we'd give him about 10 minutes to. Sit down and introduce yourself and.
Hi, my name is Dean White. I've been here once before. And I apologize. I was literally cutting hay on the back 40 when I saw what time it was. But Ben told me that I was going to be the last one on the docket, so I wasn't really concerned.
We're close.
But anyway, I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. I got a pretty sad story to tell. I feel like I've been on Ozzy Osbourne's crazy train for the last 18 months, and now I've been dropped off at the Hotel California. What happened when I bought this farm, it was my legacy project for my family. I was wanting to recreate the childhood farm that my grandfather brought me up on in western Kentucky. And we bought the place. We did some due diligence. We were told by everybody at the city and county that our project would work well. It wasn't going to be in the city, that we should file an application for denial of services, that we would that would be pretty routinely granted. We spent over a year negotiating our use with the county, and on March, I guess Vernon's right here, and we spent 6 or 8 months developing a plan. We hired T-Square Engineering. They advised us on the process. We went to met with the county, talked with Andrew Orr at the city when he was doing his hearings to determine whether or not this area was going to be kept in the UGB. Talked with the city, and they said there's no possible way that we'll ever extend sewer out to this area. You need to go through the county. So my dream was we want to educate city kids on farming practices, and along that way, we learned about the possibility of having a the South Hall thing, a rural retreat. And so the county thought that was great. We figured out we could have 58 units out there, and we started building our equestrian business, gardens. I'm really sorry. This is a big deal for me. So anyway, now we're in limbo. We can't build anything. And the city's telling us, I mean, this is a great guy, and Scott Andrews is a great guy. But I met with them Friday, I think it was Friday, and we were talking about where can we, you know, Vernon tells me I can tap into the city sewer system if I build the connection between my property and Ms. Burgess, you picked up on that right away and said BS. So I went and met with Scott and Ben, and you know they're saying they're 6 months away from even having a very high level plan of how sewer may 20 years down the road be served to this area. And I tried to pin Ben down. I said, give me a specific timetable. He said, no, well, first thing we'll do is spend 6 months studying this, and then we'll wait for some developer to come along and build an extension, which essentially means I think we're, what, 5 or 6 miles from the proposed pump station, or 10?
Well, what we talked about was essentially the future West Haven model. So ultimately, Mr. White's property is probably not going to suffice for the return on that investment. It's not going to pay for the lift station. So ultimately, you either have to have additional developers like the Smiths to participate, or the city has to come in at some form and figure what that ability is for us to participate to, spur the growth or do some sort of recapture. So, at our level, we're not able to speak directly to that. We're more along the lines of the pre-planning and the design, and then we leave Mr. White to you guys to make decisions.
So, Ben, would you please share with the council what you told me, or the alderman, what you told me about your conversations with the county sewer guy, Mr. Corwin, Brian Corwin?
We did. We talked about that a little bit, but what he's referring to is the decentralized systems for residential developments. So it's our understanding that they don't permit or won't permit decentralized systems for just residential. It's more church, civic, institutional, that type of thing.
Well, what you said was it was only for church. I mean, under county code, rural retreats are allowed with decentralized systems in the county.
That might be. I just know that.
What you told me was that what you told me was that the UG that you had met with Brian Corwin, and he had told you that the county was no longer going to allow decentralized systems in the Franklin UGB unless it was a church or a school.
Correct. Yeah. The city and the
what
county.
What about a rural retreat?
That would be completely up to the county. I can't speak for their policy.
Well, I'm worried about two things from a legal standpoint. I've practiced law for 47 years. One thing that you cannot, this city has had Mays Creek Basin in its UGB for 22 years. It doesn't even have a plan to provide any utilities to the Mays Creek Basin. And it is devastated my life. I'm 72 years, I'll be 72 years old in 5 days. I'll never live to see sewer on my property, but I won't be able to I can't build anything. As we sit here, I cannot build one thing on my property, 116 acres. And I could, if I can tear down the three houses that are on the property and decommission the existing sewer systems that probably are horrible. And that's the other thing. I mean, this deal about not using decentralized systems purify the water before they're released into the environment. Everything else in that east side of the county is pumping raw sewage into our ground. And why does this city support pumping raw sewage into the ground rather than collecting it in areas and treating it where it can be released back into the environment.
Could we clarify that real quick?
I think you're referring to septic systems?
Yes.
We're not people aren't pumping raw sewage into the ground. It's a septic system.
Okay, well, where does?
Those are very different things.
Okay, where does the urine that goes into that septic system go?
Well, do you have septic system works?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't, it purifies, but then it's pumped out, okay, on a periodic basis? So you're not pumping raw sewage into the ground. That's a mischaracterization of how septic systems work.
Where does the liquid go what are the purpose of the lines that run out of the
Yeah.
septic?
Yeah, but I'm just clarifying that it's a septic system, it is not pumping raw sewage into the ground,
It
which is
just
what you
drains
said.
in the ground, it's not pumped. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Well,
you're going to walk through how a septic system works.
Okay, well, I'm.
I mean, you're just
setting the guide off.
characterizing how a
I don't-
septic system works.
Okay, I'm
It's not
sorry.
pumping raw sewage into the ground.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's a septic system, as probably everyone is familiar with. It's just it's a decomposition process through anaerobic. Through aerobic conditions.
Okay,
So
I don't
it's-
claim to
it's
be.
bacteria that eat the waste.
I know that it's not being treated with chemicals because I live on a septic system.
Okay.
And y'all can spin it, just like everything else. Y'all can spin it however you want to, but I know that.
We just don't want people to
Liquid.
think that raw sewage is being pumped into the ground.
Okay.
You just want to be clear.
Okay, let's.
We really couldn't. We really couldn't live like that if we did
Yeah.
all over our county.
Yeah,
We'd
yeah,
have
it's just not
major health
Okay,
issue.
well, I personally have one in my home
question.
in Missouri, and I know what happens there. Y'all maybe have something magic here.
Vice Mayor, did you want to ask a question?
I'm not sure that I understand just exactly what is being said here. We don't do septic tanks anyway. We don't do that. So why is it we're not, first off, the city's not pumping it into it. But I'm in somewhat agreement with you. Is you got field lines, you got service lines all coming out. When that tank fills up, if it fills up, it's got to be pumped. It's got to go someplace, and it's got to be pumped out. So people have their septic systems pumped out, cleaned out, and
Right, the solids.
yeah, right.
The
So
solids,
what you're saying is, when you pull a lever on that commode, it goes down into that tank, right?
Yes.
Right. So yeah.
Well, I'm going
But-
to stop us right
I'm
there
sorry,
just a
this is
minute.
getting too
Excuse me, Mr.
technical.
White. I'm going to stop us right there. I think what we're talking about is whether to allow you to have sanitary sewer service for your property. And the board's been discussing the urban growth boundary and waiting on a basin study, which I think Ben said would be sometime around March, for us to better understand what the probabilities are, how we could service your property quickly, or more quickly, or sooner. The issue is that allowing you to have septic on your property is then going to block a significant portion of the basin, which is a concern for us also. So,
Y'all looked at what's in the base. I mean, you go east from my property to Nolensville, and it's wall-to-wall subdivision. So I mean, to me, the horse has left the barn on that. I'm not in a very good mood, as you can probably tell.
our staff has been very receptive to you.
They
to
have.
discuss,
They have been.
And they'll continue to work with us. We know it's a challenging problem for you, and we want to work with you to try to find a solution.
Well, I very much appreciate that. I would ask if y'all could perhaps ask the city attorney to render a legal opinion on whether the city can keep a UGB maintained after being in the UGB for 23 years. I think it's completely illegal. And I very much respect the city's goals to have density in these areas, and I support that. But I think what you're doing is extremely illegal, and, you know.
Yes, sir. We'll pass that along to our city
I
attorney.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, Mr. White.
I do have a question.
Go ahead. Do you want it for Mr. White, or you want?
No.
Okay.
That's fine. No.
No, it's
Well,
for staff.
that's
Mr.
fine,
White.
thanks.
Thank you.
have we ever gotten these parties together, including the Smiths, because this is a relatively, close area out there, to have a discussion about how they might all partner?
I think we've passed the Smiths' contact information to Mr. White and allowed those guys to make an introduction and talk, but we have not formally.
In the basin plan update gives you an opportunity to look at how services provided in that, and throughout the basin, and that could facilitate some discussions on how you get there and what you do for him and how you find a way to continue to provide the option of service to others in the basin.
Between these property owners and Envision Franklin, I think you were going to mention that. We've got to bring these parties together and start talking about, we have to do the study, we have to do an update. And Mr. White was wrong. I mean, 2006 and I think 13, I think, wasn't it? 14,
Yes.
15? Yeah, I think it was. We did update that, but we don't have a major plan for this area. And we didn't know the state was going to come in. Well, we figured someday for 96 and everything, and all of these things are happening. So you actually can't do some of the things until some things happen. And when they start happening, that is the catalyst to get these things done. And our catalyst now is to go ahead and get this basin study done. I would ask that we do everything we can to move this basin study up as quickly as possible. We have to put a few other things on the back shelf or just, slide by a little bit. I think we need to really put all of our efforts in this basin study. I know it's not easy to do.
To see if we can do that, but we're trying to give you a
I know.
Realistic time frame.
Yeah, I know.
Which we can deliver.
But
Now, the plan we do have is a good plan. The part of the interest in developing out in this area of the basin and seriously has only been in recent years. We were not receiving inquiries back in 2007 or 8 or 9.
Oh, no, we didn't.
And if, it may have looked different if there was interest expressed, but,
Sure.
and again, it's
I get
easier
it.
to develop
I get it.
the basin out if you go closer to where the sewer is and work your way out. So, these requests, I don't know when they first started coming in, but it's only been within recent years. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we do that.
And they're not annexed currently.
Correct.
Right.
No,
Yeah,
no,
so
they're-
it's
they're
not like we created a
They're
service
not
plan
annexed,
for
so
them.
we
Go ahead,
don't-
Alderman
Yeah, that-
Bailey.
and that's
We're not
part of how that
We're not
evolves.
required to give
Exactly.
them
That's part of how that's
sewer
all
if they're
evolves.
not annexed.
I just want to say one thing less, the public listening, because I empathize with Mr. White. And, but there are 1,200 acres of other property owners who are not sitting here right now. And we have to think about their property rights as well. And it's, I know that's frustrating, and I really do. I want to speed this up as well for Mr. White. I want to find a way to hit for any property owner to achieve their goals within our plans if it meets them. But I got to think that somebody up the line of the 1,200 other acres that would come through here, they don't know about this discussion. And if we make a rush decision, what are we denying them and those property owners? And they don't know to be here and advocate for themselves. And so, while and I think the difference too, to the point of that we haven't done anything in the last 20 years. Envision Franklin is the difference maker in my opinion right now, and the changes that have been made in that area. And why this does need to speed up, because there's a 5-lane road that's about to open up. And we have some really creative development ideas that I think from the public input that are very palatable and actually energizing for a lot of people. So the sooner we get this figured out, the better. But I did want to mention that I think all of us probably empathize with Mr. White, and we never want to see this. But his property impacts a lot of other properties.
You got another comment?
I've just got one more question. I'm still trying to figure out what we expect to get out of whatever we're trying to study. What are we wanting to get out of that? Where the sewer lines go?
Yep.
That's okay.
Exactly.
And we have spent how much time on that, and we need how much more time to do that?
So we actually got the legal requisition, I think, approved a couple weeks back. We have worked with the consultant. They've, on their own, they have started the process, so they're well into that process. They're trying to speed it through as fast as they can, but unfortunately for us, we have to take it through the appropriate channels here at the city for release, and they did go ahead and start that. So we're anticipating having the plan completed by end of November, 1st of December. We will need to take about a month, hopefully less time than that, to go through that plan and make sure that all the numbers and everything makes sense. And then we would put that on the first work session for you guys so that you'd see it.
So would we get back and look at that at the first of next year? We're going to see the red lines going specifically where you think the sewer line should be and how it affects this property here.
Correct.
And the other properties.
And the other
help you figure out
Correct.
what service options might be for him that don't preclude service to other property owners elsewhere in the basin. That would be what I would hope we would try to figure out.
So the system that he's talking about, is Tollgate like that? Do you know what Tollgate is?
I think Tollgate
Is
a
South Hall
decentralized
like
system.
that?
I think so.
Okay, but now we don't, we don't have the jurisdiction to determine whether or not he develops with that type of system, do we?
No. Well, if it develops in the
The
county.
county has policy.
Right.
Yeah.
The county. If we decide to annex, then that would be up to us. But allowing for a decentralized system, there are some recent legislation that we are currently digging into and researching that may put us in the seat of being an enforcement entity.
A regulator.
Yes, a regulator per se. So we need to understand that better. We've had some brief conversations about it. The other piece too is, and we'll give you a deeper update when we talk about decentralized systems, but there's two ways to discharge. You can do land application, which takes up additional land, or you can do a direct discharge, which would require an NPDES permit from the state. I don't know if the state would permit. It depends on the water quality coming out of these systems. Some do very well, some less so, but that's some of the things that we've been digging into. Scott had mentioned we met with a consultant a week or so ago to kind of go through the different systems that he's working on. So we're trying to educate ourselves a little bit better so we can better inform you and go from there. So there's a couple of paths that we're taking here, not only just the basin plan, but decentralized systems. We have a presentation that we got to kind of update and everything, and I think we could probably get that in front of you all in the next few months, I would say. Is that fair? Michelle, are you going to kick me?
On decentralized systems?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So sometime in February of next year, we should see a map with the red lines on it.
Yeah, and we're also looking to do profiles of the lines as well, which is going to be rough profiles, but what that'll tell us is if we allow for a decentralized system there, it will identify specifically where the easements are going to be required that he would have to dedicate to us. So that's another piece that we're looking at as well.
One final question, this is just a general. We've mentioned Marshboro Road being widened. How does it affect this property? Does it?
I don't know that it
It's too
affects
far
this-
away.
Really affects more of the basin.
It's just the whole basin. It may make
And
more
interest.
development possible, drive development interest. And so that's what we're looking at, is not cutting off 22% of the basin with the decision we make for one property owner.
Correct.
That's kind of the bottom line.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8 is City of Franklin Contract 2023-0236 with Hazen and Sawyer for cost of services and dynamic rate analysis.
So we've been doing 5-year rate studies for probably the last 13 or 14 years. We're getting ready to update that 5-year rate plan, and we're bringing on a consultant to help us do that. This is a different consultant than we've used in the previous cycles. So we went back out and looked at who might be best to provide that, and we are recommending Hazen for that work. I don't know. Do you want to add anything to that, Michelle?
The difference with this one than ones in the past is that the model that's used to create the different scenarios for volumetric versus like the customer charges, we're going to get that model. So we'll be able to run those scenarios and kind of come up with the different alternatives that we present to you.
So we'll own that. We'll own that model, which will help us. In the past, we've had to go back to
A
the
lot of
consultant
iterations.
to do different iterations, and this will give us a little more capacity to do that ourselves once we've developed it.
Yeah. This is also one of the engineering consultants that we use. So just the familiarity with like our operations and kind of some of the costs that we get will be a little bit more seamless. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Item number 9 is a review of the traffic impacts analysis survey results and initial discussion about potential revisions to the City of Franklin's TIA manual.
We bring our engineering and traffic engineering team. You've had individual discussions. We've had a group discussion a little while back, and we wanted to bring to you results from those discussions, survey done with the board, and kind of talk about where we go from here. So who's kicking it off?
I'm gonna kick it off.
Take it away, Paul.
Then Adam's gonna handle the last part, and then we'll have a little discussion about, make sure we're headed down the right path as it relates to traffic impact studies and traffic in general. So just to go over the survey results, the first question that we talked about, and again, just as a reminder for those watching home, is we sent a survey out to the board with various questions just to try to get your feedback on where you wanted to go with traffic, whether it's in the high growth areas, or do we differentiate between high growth areas and areas outside of those high growth, and really to help us develop a standard and help staff better prepare recommendations as we come forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So the first one was about developments located inside that high growth area, and we're just saying, for example, a 1 mile area from I-65 corridor. Ultimately, we'll have to define that a little better than just saying simply 1 mile, and we can work on that. But the question we asked is, if at over 100 peak hour trips, once you exceed those 100 peak hour trips, should that traffic impact study be extended essentially from the half mile radius to the 1 mile radius? And with that survey, 6 of you said yes, that we should definitely extend that in those high growth areas. 1 said no, and 2 we did not get a response from. The next question we asked is really trying to drill down into the high growth areas, is to better understand acceptable overall intersection delay in these areas. So the question that was asked is, how much delay was too much? And again, based on looking at the survey results, it was a mixed results, but what we took away was majority would indicate that 160 seconds to 210 seconds of delay is too much. And we met with everybody individually. And what we took away, or what we told everyone, is really once you, and Adam told you all this, is once you get past that 160 second delay, traffic really becomes pretty much unmanageable for us. There's really little to nothing that we can do to help control and facilitate that. So the next area of the survey really talked about outside that high growth areas. So the question we asked is, should we keep the current study area requirements, which again, as a reminder, 100 to 250 peak hour trips, should we keep that at a half mile radius? And then anything over those 250 peak hour trips go to a mile radius. And that was pretty consistent across the board, is 5 of y'all said yes and 2 said no. The next question was, should we keep that current level of service standard and delay requirements? We asked how much delay is too much. And again, essentially, what we took away from the survey results is that we should stick with our standard requirements outside that high growth area. We also asked about the central business district, and again, that was very much mixed results. Our takeaway from those survey results were the majority wanted less than that 80 seconds of delay there, was the general consensus of that. But again, that was mixed results. So moving on to more of the development process, we asked the question as to, you guys see these developers come to y'all really early on in the process. They also come to the joint conceptual meeting prior to a traffic impact study being done. And that's really when it's your time to have that conversation with the Planning Commission and y'all as a board about whether you want to see changes in that development. And so we asked the question is that, should these TIAs be finalized prior to the joint conceptual FMPC BOMA workshop. And the majority, again, 4 said yes, 2 said no. So that was a clear majority, in our opinion, that these should be done earlier in the process to, one, educate you all and be extremely transparent with the impacts that their development has and the current level of service in the area. The next question we asked is, should staff recommend that BOMA contribute existing road impact fees when the impact fees generated by development do not cover the cost of the necessary roadway improvements? And again, 5 of you said yes, and we'll dig into that one a little bit more here in a second. 1 said no. And then the last one was, again, pretty much unanimous, is that when developers aren't willing to build infrastructure and they're not willing to follow our plans, should we recommend disapproval? And again, 5 said yes, and 1 said no. And so we tried to look at this and look at what are our short-term changes we want to make. Obviously, some of the areas where we have mixed results probably just needs more conversation. But from the survey, what could we take away as the short-term changes that we want to make? So what we're going to do is update our TIA guidelines, and Adam will work on that. But immediately, we'd like to start, as soon as we update the guidelines and put it out there to the design professionals, we'd like to start requiring those TIAs to be, and I'm going to say substantially complete, prior to going to FMPC BOMA workshop, meaning they don't have to be 100% complete, but we need to have a really good understanding of existing traffic conditions, background traffic conditions, and the projected traffic. And again, these development plans are going to change as they get presented to BOMA, but we want them to be substantially complete so that we can provide you with as much information as possible.
Can I ask?
Go ahead.
Substantially complete. I think there'll be some debate. What does that mean?
Meaning, do we have confidence in the report that it was done appropriate, that, that...
I know you don't have to answer now, but I
Yeah.
do think that as y'all develop this, just let's maybe set up.
It's a 90%.
Just set the expectation up front, because I do think that's important. 'cause
It will.
I
The
know.
data that we're giving you we need to be able to rely on. We need to understand it, but that's generally, and we use that same term with construction. When the roadway's open, it's substantially complete versus finals, all the punch list. So the next one is, as it relates to how we use additional impact fees when a development doesn't generate enough impact fees to cover the cost. And y'all were confident, or y'all agreed that, yes, we should recommend that. And I'm still going to say, generally, yes, you're right, but I still want to ask ourselves these questions and really pose that question to you guys as a board, because you make the decision is, do the proposed improvements really improve capacity, that overall arterial collector system? Do we have the additional funding? That's a pretty important item to ask ourselves. And then the third one is this an area of the city that you want to spend the money? And I'm going to give you an example. Is Poplar Farms as a development, in what they did is they came in and wanted additional collector funding to build Market Street. And I would say, is Market Street in that quadrant for collector roadways your priority, or is it Clovercroft roadway? And should you spend a substantial amount of money trying to get Market Street done, or should you be saving that for a project? And that really comes back to you as a board, is make sure we're spending the money where you want to spend it. And you all drive development. Don't let development drive where you're spending it. But those are questions you guys would need to answer, and we would obviously use those as a starting ground for our recommendation.
But also Clovercroft is part city and part county.
Correct.
We're talking about that now. May I ask a
Go
question,
ahead,
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman
Thank
Berger.
you. The developer's building Market Street.
Yes.
Okay. But some of us on this board, not including me, voted for that development. And I understand that Market Street was, a low-hanging fruit that they would like to get if development's going to happen. My personal opinion, the development wasn't right for that area, but it happened. So that's water under the bridge. We are where we are. So whether we voted for or against it, we're all moving on. This is happening. We're getting Market Street put in. So we better darn well look at Clovercroft. Now, McEwen 4 is going to be a 4-lane highway. And since I've been on this board, I've been here working to get it moved up from 49th on the list. We are, number one, we're getting ready to bulldoze it in January, hopefully, and build that road. Clovercroft is not going to be, and let me just throw this out there, because Clovercroft's not going to be a 4-lane highway or a 4-lane road anytime in our lifetime, anybody sitting in this room. And we do need to do some work on it. And we've had discussions, and we've been in some meetings. All of us have been over here in the meeting with the county. And regardless, we need a partnership with the county, and regardless of what they choose to do on their end of the county, we have to put some shoulders and take out a curve or two on that Clovercroft to make it a safer road within the city limits. What happens within the county limits is up to them, and we are hoping that they are going to step up to the plate and do that with us as a partner. I don't know if there's grant money or if anything out there that we can get, but we certainly will be looking for it. And I just throw that out there because we are talking about CIC, and we know the CIP projects, and we're going to have to discuss that. So capacity, but safety has got to be number one. And it says, should the city invest additional funding? And I think we all need to be talking about that. And in our part of the city, it's probably not that extensive. We don't have that much of a problem over there. We have certain spaces. We've had 2 deaths on that road, and we've had, within the last year or so, 3 flipped cars, and they're all from my church. Every person that flipped the car, and it was 2 people coming over on the side of the road and another one slippery road.
Yeah, and I totally agree with everything you're saying. The point I was simply trying to make is a developer wanted us to contribute more funding to Market Street, where staff ultimately said,
And we said
no, we
no.
should be saving that for Clovercroft because we know there's, or another road, because we know there's other issues that we're going to have to address
Yeah, and they are
long-term.
building the road. So I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that.
The expectation, I think kind of what you're asking though, is the expectation though should, quite frankly, from the applicant should be that it's on them.
And that's what was determined,
And
unless you all say otherwise.
these criteria that you've outlined in bullet point 1, 2, and 3, staff should consider those. And if you're going to see our CIP road improvement priorities, and if the said project is in that quadrant and could jeopardize a CIP project for a development that hasn't been on our radar, we need to know that. And it's going to deduct from said money for Clovercroft.
Correct.
If we approve said, X development for whatever, and, X developer wants us to pitch in more, like, we just need to know that this is, like, the economic cost of that. Like, okay, yeah, y'all can do that, BOMA, but Clovercroft's gonna be docked $2 million. Your priorities that you've outlined, it's gotta come from somewhere. So I think those 3 questions are good, but the expectation needs to be, if a development wants to just, the path of least resistance, it's on them.
Absolutely. Anything else is a challenge. and we
But
gotta
there's
work through it.
but they also have an avenue though, that if they can make these arguments or make these, work with you to figure this out because there's some alternative benefits, then that can be a path as well. Just make it more clear, so we're not surprised as we have been in the past.
Yep.
And may I add to
Go
that?
ahead.
So when we're looking at these projects and we have, like, Patrick, you're right, we have this, but we may have to take the money for Clovercroft or away from Clovercroft. Do we want to do that or away from the project? I think number one, we have to say, wait a minute, stop the presses, let's take a look at this. And let's regroup a little bit, even though we might have had something prioritized, we have to look at safety. Number one across the board, we have to look at safety. Over there, we've got schools, we've got people traveling that road every day for schools, buses, lots of buses. And just like McEwen had an unbelievable amount of buses. So I think, could you help us when you bring that stuff to us and you
Yeah.
tell us what things should we be looking at? Number one is safety. We have other things that we need to look at.
Congestion, economic development.
Economic development, but also what schools are there, what drives the traffic on that road? Is it a school? is it assisted living? Is it a big development? What is it? So I think that would be helpful to us if you brought it to us.
Absolutely do that. The last one is when developers, short-term change, when developers aren't willing to comply with our standards, Envision Franklin zoning, whatever offsite improvements, automatically we're going to recommend disapproval based on the feedback that we got. And that's pretty rare that occurs. And I'm going to turn it over to Adam for the last few slides.
If I could just quickly say, we're considering an item tonight where we're going to be asked whether we put additional money to improve the project, so good timing.
So moving on to the other short-term changes, these are more aimed at the TIA guidelines that we currently have. As Paul said, the high-growth areas, that 1 mile kind of radius from I-65, that if it has more than 100 peak hour trips, we'll expand that study area to a mile instead of a half mile, and that was from the survey. We'll also do the when the delays are greater than 80 seconds, level service F. We'll still bring that to the board, and we'll need to evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. You all will look at them, and we'll just bring them to you, put them in the memo on when it hits that. And outside, we're not gonna make any changes. So what that looks like on the next slide is basically.
Will there be any F++, 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 F++?
We don't have any tornado designations.
I'm joking saying that, but that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if y'all talked about doing
We
that
did.
and clearly chose not to.
It's,
Which is fine, or maybe you didn't. Maybe I should just.
yeah, I mean,
They chose.
there will be levels where we'll tell you it exceeds your too much, the 160, right?
But what if it's 400, and you just tell me it's F and it's 160?
We'll
it's
be
different
bringing
than
you those numbers.
175.
Yeah,
bring
we'll
you
bring
the
you those numbers. You will have those.
So here we just added, basically it's a third column on the right, the inside the high growth area column, which expands that limit in that high growth area to 1 mile. And then as you see in the plus 250 or more than 250, the minimum requirements will be the row above it, but we'll probably end up expanding some of those limits if the peak hour trips are over 250. That's a fairly big development, and we tend to expand those anyways.
Good. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to Paul and Adam, and to all of you for taking the time to meet with us, prepare the survey. We also sent it to the Planning Commission, but regretfully, we didn't get as many responses as we had hoped. But just to remind all of you, but also some of our development professionals that are in the room or may be viewing, the purpose of upgrading our TIA guidelines is to allow staff to be more predictable with the standards that we're applying to a development, and also equitable. There's more work to be done as far as what improvements will we be requiring a developer to make. So this is a start, and as Adam and Paul assured you, we'll implement these initial changes, particularly getting that TIA substantially completed before we come to the joint workshop with these larger projects. And also to keep in mind that we've historically spent a lot of time complying with zoning and development regulations that are more about the physical built environment. Quality of life and the traffic impacts go hand in glove in our community. And these TIA guidelines that we've discussed over the last several months are incredibly important in the staff recommendation of projects coming forward in the community. So thank you for what you've shared and supported thus far, but we are going to be back because there's more to it.
Yeah, and real quick, along with the survey results, inside that high growth area, that level serves F, the 160 too much. So we did move that chain a little bit to a higher level of service tolerance.
or I should say a lower level of service, Kyle Lawrence, with the 162nd delay. So as you see, that's inside that growth area. We'll still recommend off-site improvements if we're a level service F, anything above 80, we'll recommend that. I'm sorry, between 55 and 80. And then really the next slide is just showing you an example of where this 1 mile area might be. If you want to go to the next one. We drew this up real quick. This is an example area. It's not set in stone, but that gives you an idea of this 1 mile high density area that we're talking about.
And the way we'll ultimately word it is as determined by the city traffic engineer. That way, if it's a really small, minor, low traffic type development, we have ability to at least waive requirements that they don't just have to meet that don't make sense. And with that said, we'll open up to any questions that you might have or feedback.
I think you had some pretty good questions during the presentation. I don't see any further. So unless there's further, we'll go to item number 10, which is contract number 2023-0297, Memorandum of Understanding between the City, Franklin Preservation Partners, LLC, and First United Methodist Church, Inc., to purchase and transfer property related to the racetrack parcel and the Creekside parcel properties.
So we have put into a draft memorandum of understanding the conditions or the terms that we talked about a few weeks ago related to the Creekside property, the opportunity for the city to acquire 34 acres adjacent to or just north of Harlansdale Farm that connects us to the 53 acres also owned by the city, by the water utility. Also securing property at the east corner, the southeast corner of Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road, and property just east of the railroad in that area as well. Collectively represents an opportunity for the city to acquire 76 acres of land for open space, park, and recreational development over time. And to acquire those 76 acres for $6.25 million, so about $82,000 an acre. We have drafted this language to reflect essentially what we talked to you about a few weeks ago in terms of how that would work and how city dollars would be allocated to an acquisition from Franklin First United Methodist Church and an acquisition from the Franklin Preservation Partners between now and the end of the year. There would be an initial installment payment made if the board approved tonight by the end of this week of $2 million, and we've provided for that through a supplemental agreement to this memorandum of understanding. Specifically, we would ask you to give us really a motion tonight, if you'd like, to grant the city administrator and city attorney the opportunity to execute an agreement substantially in the form of this draft that you have tonight. There's likely to be some tweaks of language as we work, especially with the church. They've just recently got an attorney on board working with them, and there may be some adjustments. But the general concept in terms of how much the city's paying and the timing and the conditions would be roughly similar to what we're presenting to you tonight. If there was anything beyond that, we would certainly bring it back to you, but would ask for that authority so that we can move forward, make that initial installment payment here in September, and continue to work through the details and the timing. The church in particular has a process they have to go through. They have to work with the district office of the United Methodist Church, and then the congregation also has to vote and make a decision about doing a transaction of this nature. So that's going to take some time, and we want to respect that, but we also want to be able to keep things moving, and giving that authority to myself, working with the city attorney, I think helps us keep that going. So I won't belabor it. We talked about it in pretty good detail a few weeks ago, and I know we've got folks who want to speak to it today. We have representatives of the Franklin Preservation Partners here. I know Friends of Franklin Parks have been engaged in this opportunity as well, and it's an exciting opportunity, exciting partnership that can preserve land and expand and enhance what we offer from a recreational and open space to our community and really serve us well for generations to come. So I just think it's a tremendous opportunity. We've got the framework that I think will get us there, and we look for any other questions you have on how we move forward if you'd like to tonight. And we do have this on the voting session to move forward if you'd like to tonight.
I'd like to hear from the speakers. Okay, we've got 4 speakers: Tori Barnhill, Ed Silva, Rachel Finch, and Mindy Tate. So we'll give you 2 minutes each.
Good evening. I'm Tori Barnhill, and I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Franklin Parks. I'm also a longtime resident of Franklin. I'm here to speak in support of the City of Franklin entering into an agreement to purchase the Creekside property and preserving the last remaining green gateway into Franklin on the corners of Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road. I'd like to begin by thanking our mayor, our aldermen, city staff, and the Parks Department for their leadership and hard work to get us to this point. Based on feedback and public comment, this project seems closely aligned with what citizens desire for the future of Franklin. In the updated draft of Envision Franklin, it says throughout the public process, citizens made clear the desire for land to remain as open space and for open space preservation to be an important principle as our future growth occurs. This acquisition would have huge results for the citizens of Franklin, including the expansion of Harlansdale, public access to within 300 yards of the state and city-owned historic site known as Roper's Knob, and the preservation of the last remaining green gateway into our city. I understand that this is a major investment for the city of Franklin, but thankfully we have the wisdom and experience from similar historic acquisitions to guide us to success. This visionary project is very reminiscent of Roper's Knob in 1994, Harlansdale Farm in 2004, and Eastern Flank Battlefield Park in 2006. Each of these were the result of a public-private partnership, an investment that will pay off for generations to come. These areas have now become integral to our community as well as newly acquired Green Gateway. Thank you for your time.
Ed, you want to go out of line, Ed?
Sure. A few remarks. Thank you for allowing me to address the board and Mr. Mayor. Back in the 80s, I was chairperson of what was called Franklin's Corridor and Connector Streets Economic Development Projects. And it was so wordy that people didn't want to keep saying that, so they called it Streetscape. And as chairman of Streetscape, I think when we look back, we see the Main Street and what happened to Main Street. But what we forget was that original project was extension of the connector roads too. It was Franklin Road and Columbia Highway and out to 96, with the idea that we would improve our inner city as well as the extension of our downtown, with the idea that we would have sidewalks, which would a unique concept, so that you could actually walk along the highway and not get risk of getting run over. And it's heartwarming to drive down Franklin Road now and actually see the sidewalks and actually see the period lighting and taking down that old web of wires and ugly poles. And so it's taken all of almost 40 years, but we've been progressing over that time. And I ask you to consider this issue of Roper's Knob. The Heritage Foundation bought that property for $400,000 back in the 80s. And then we gifted it to the city of Franklin. And why did we do that? Because it's not only important historically because of what happened during the battle, but it's an important landmark to this city. And now we're looking at a tract of land that's the first cousin of Roper's Knob. And I think it's important that we that we preserve that and not have a mixed use of that property when we can keep it in its present state, which would then support Roper's Knob and what our community is all about. You know, Roper's Knob was, as a transplanted Yankee, I'm not sure of all the history here, but it was a key signal station during the Civil War, and it is listed in the National Register since 2000. So for almost a quarter of a century, Roper's Knob is listed as a national treasure. And let's not do something, I think, to harm that treasure. Let's mate it. The gateways to Franklin are as important as downtown Franklin, because it tells who we are before we actually get here. And we ought to have the same sense of preservation to our gateways and corridors as we do downtown. So I urge you to please save that property and keep it in the treasury of the city. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good to see you, Mr. Mayor and Board of Mayor and Alderman. My name is Rachel Finch, and I serve as the Senior Director of Preservation Education for the Heritage Foundation of Williamson County. So much of our future lies in how we choose to preserve our past. Envision Franklin states the preservation of historic resources is of paramount importance to protecting Franklin's heritage and cultural identity. The Heritage Foundation could not agree more. In the mid-1990s, as you just heard Mr. Ed Silva speak, we worked diligently to secure Roper's Knob, located just over the ridge from Creekside, to not only share its importance as a Civil War signal station and encampment for federal soldiers during the height of occupation in 1863, but to forever save it from being encroached upon by development. And since saving Roper's Knob, the Heritage Foundation has continued to advocate for protecting the last remaining green gateway into historic Franklin. When we announced our sites to save endangered property list in 2021, Creekside and the Daniel McMahon House were two sites featured on the list, both deemed fragile and both very worthy of preservation. We're thrilled to learn in November 2022 that Franklin Preservation Partners entered into a purchase agreement to save the Creekside property from development. And within the past year, we've been encouraged to learn of fruitful conversations between Franklin Preservation Partners, the City of Franklin, and Franklin First United Methodist Church, who are the current owners of the historic racetrack property and the Daniel McMahon House, to include these historic sites as well. We're quite pleased to know that Franklin Preservation Partners will sell the historic Creekside home and 3.7 acres at a future date to a preservation-minded buyer. This is all truly significant and welcome news, demonstrating solidarity and community advocacy and a commitment to preserving our intangible cultural heritage in perpetuity. And today, the Heritage Foundation places its full support behind the City of Franklin to purchase all of the associated acreage that also includes the historic racetrack and the Daniel McMahon House. All of these historic properties, with their unmatched vistas, will enhance Harlansdale Farm, continue to preserve the historic Green Gateway into downtown Franklin, and be recognized as untouched treasures we hope that will be studied by archaeologists and preservationists to reveal unknown associated stories connected to all people and events in Franklin and Williamson County that we have yet to discover. The Heritage Foundation appreciates Franklin Preservation Partners and the City of Franklin for their commitment to save vital green space and historic properties, and for recognizing how together that we may all partner to utilize our available resources and combined expertise to elevate our collective history to better our future. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mindy Tate, CEO of Franklin Tomorrow. This morning, Franklin Tomorrow's Executive Committee voted to voice its support of the acquisition by the City of Franklin of the Creekside properties and racetrack site adjacent to Franklin First United Methodist. The preservation of open space has been a tenet of Franklin Tomorrow's core principles since its founding 23 years ago, and this property would be another pearl in the necklace of parks throughout our community. We've conducted surveys with you and independently of citizens and throughout those 23 years, those surveys have shown that people want to see more open space in our community. They want the chance to get out of their cars and have walkability and connectivity. As stated in the memo by staff for this item, we believe, quote, "This land will enhance the footprint of the park at Harlansdale Farm and provide expanded opportunities for open space and community use east of Franklin Road while preserving this important gateway into Franklin's historic downtown." It's really exciting to see this picture and kind of see that we're creating a wall of green as you welcome into our community from a very busy area adjacent to this in the Cool Springs area. So this is really creating kind of that buffer that we've been looking for. This property would add more than 75 acres, as you've heard, to the city of Franklin's park system. And the cost of acquisition can be paid through the hotel motel tax or parkland dedication fees without additional burden to the taxpayers. I was excited to hear about people talking about Roper's Knob. I was here when that property was acquired, and I've actually been to the top of Roper's Knob. Few people can probably say that. I don't know that I'd want to go today because probably the growth is waist high, probably to get to the top of Roper's Knob. But our community banded together. Remember when kids save their pennies to buy and contribute towards Roper's Knob? The nimbleness of the Franklin Preservation Partners in acquiring this property has presented the city a great opportunity to save this important gateway from development. Numerous proposals had been presented for just that scenario of development, and they were rejected because I believe the desire was to see this property retain its sense of place. Franklin Tomorrow believes the acquisition of the Creekside property by the city of Franklin as open space or parkland allows this property to do just that, retain its sense of place, and adding to the special qualities that make Franklin a great place to live, work, play, and worship and study. So thank you. Please consider supporting the acquisition tonight.
Alderman Brown, you look like you want to speak.
Well, I have never agreed with four people more in my entire life, and I could not have written any of those presentations any better than what they wrote them. I think the bigness of it, and I think the bigness of, and I think the importance of those voices in particular is notable, almost as notable as the residents themselves who have said, we want this to happen. And so, well said and well done. I did have one, I have heard questions about sort of the easement on some of this, and I wouldn't mind if we could have somebody from Preservation Partners, maybe can you just explain the easement part of that? Maybe Rod, if you could, or if you're the best.
Sit down here. Roger, you're welcome to sit at the... Sure.
Thank you. Before answering that question... Button. On? Good. Before answering that question specifically, I do want to express deep appreciation to the aldermen who have been innovative and thoughtful about this, and particularly to Eric Stuckey and Shauna Billingsley, who have been working with us in implementing what I hope will be adopted. It's been a great example of how city government should work. On the specific question, when we established this partnership, we envisioned acquiring 61.8 acres. Frankly, that was because two previous development proposals had been presented to you all. And we felt it was inappropriate that this gateway should be, in the future, potentially lost to development. Accordingly, we saw the 61.8 acres only as what would be preserved. Now I'm really delighted that what we have is potentially 95 acres. It's not only the 78 acres that the city of Franklin is going to be acquiring, but it's the other 17 acres which will be part of this transaction. We envision, and we have put it in the contract, so we are obligated to the city of Franklin to meet the easement obligations that I'm about to set forth specifically. And we have undertaken that with respect to the Methodist Church, the 13.4 acres that will be sold to the Methodist Church, if you and the church approve, will be subject to a perpetual easement. The Land Trust of Tennessee has agreed to participate with us as the partner for the long-term easement holding. We've had extensive discussions with the church, and we've said consistently we will not do this unless it's open space plus a few acres for parking. And they, up to now, have accepted it. But frankly, there is, as Eric has outlined, a significant process for the church to undergo, but we will expect to adhere to that. With respect to Creekside itself, we have envisioned that would be included with easements similar to historic properties, that no additional facilities would be allowed, and that we would have open space fully there. I've only mentioned that more even than the documents, you should rely, in effect, on the purpose behind this. 8 of us are now obligated $9,300,000 so far we've expended in this. If you go forward with this, we'll ultimately get $7 million. We still will have upwards of $3 million as a significant risk. But I would undertake to you on behalf of Preservation Partners that when we transfer this, we will transfer it with the easements, regardless of whether or not we achieve the amount required for full resolution of our cost. Any further questions about that?
One of the things we did also incorporate, a little different angle on the easement component, is an access easement, maybe necessary on that east side, because the way that's configured, and that's something we will work out over time with the Creekside. So
Yeah,
that's
we also-
another element that's important
Yep.
to make that property accessible, usable over time. That's another element that's anticipated here.
And we will specifically also probably include easements with respect to the Methodist Church component to ensure the kind of access to which Eric refers.
Anybody else? Vice Mayor?
Go through again, just a little, on what the 6.25 million, does that purchase is 2, 4, 5, and 6?
It purchases 2, 5, and 6 for the city, and then a portion of our purchase, well, the purchase of 2 facilitates the purchase of 4 by the church.
Right.
So they'll use those dollars, add $750,000 of additional resources for the purchase of parcel 4 by the church from the Franklin Preservation Partners. So looking at the diagram, just working west to east or right to left, parcel 1 is already owned by the City of Franklin Water Management Utility. That's about 53 acres of land. Parcel 2 is what's called the racetrack property. That's about 34 acres. That includes the historic racetrack and the historic McMahon home. So that would be acquired by the city from Franklin First United Methodist Church. Parcel 3 is the existing United Methodist, the remainder of the existing Franklin First United Methodist Church campus. And 4 is that southwest corner that they would purchase from Franklin Preservation Partners and become part of an updated Franklin First campus. And then on the east side, you see 5, which is that southeast corner. And that's approximately 25 acres. And the area just east of the railroad track is parcel 6. That's about, 17 acres. That is in a, that is not developable property at all. But that is also be part of the open space the city would acquire, those two collectively. And then the parcel 7 is the Creekside home and surrounding property that would be sold privately by the Preservation Partners. And as Rod described, with some protective language around that in terms of easements there as well.
So when we buy 2, one uses the money that we've spent of giving them for 2 to buy 4.
Exactly. They add some additional resources to that, and then that's a transaction between the church and the partners group.
The church would be paying $725,000 in addition to the amount that
$750,000,
they'll realize
yes.
from the city.
You good? Anybody else?
I just say that, first of all, there has been a lot of hours that have gone into this. And a lot of conversations. And I got to thank the church has been fantastic in, because this original vision was 4, 5, 6. And I think the church seeing the vision for putting this, and they still haven't voted on it. But being willing to step up and do this has really made this exceptional, I think, for the city. Connecting our property on one and one with Harlansdale, and just the opportunities of additional walking trails. The Heritage Foundation, thank you, Rachel, for your comments, because that is spot on. And it is exactly how I think all of us have been feeling about this project. And so thank you, Heritage Foundation, for being on board with this. It's vital. And this is something we can all be on board with. Kids save pennies to go to Roper's Knob, and they can't really get there. And that's ultimately what this is pointing towards, is that my kids and my grandkids hopefully can walk from Cool Springs Boulevard through Roper's Knob, through this fantastic Harlansdale Park, or from the rec center and the western side of town, or from the north, or the Cool Springs, and get to downtown without leaving a park. That's the vision. And we have to get over the railroad track to do it. We have to get on this side of Franklin Road to do it. And so really it's thanks to the preservation partners, and thanks to the aldermen and to the mayor and the city staff that took a difficult concept and have pulled together to see this come tonight. And I really appreciate it. And I do hope Friends of Franklin Parks and others, there is some private fundraising that ends up occurring to fill the gap, and I think there is an appetite for that. But tonight we got to get this going. And so there's a lot more details to work out with the fundraising and all the rest. But if there is any fundraising, we're assuming with this agreement, there's none in this agreement. But there could be some. There is room for that, and I think there's appetite for that. Is that correct? I think that's correct.
Yes, that's
Thank
our
you.
understanding. I
I've
might
got Alderman
supplement that, if I may. I mentioned earlier leadership. We have been consistently concerned that the perfect will be the enemy of the good, because this is a project that is readily expandable. And I want to pay tribute to the city and to specific Alderman Baggett particularly, in recognizing the potential addition beyond our 61.8 of the 34 acres of the church. I think this is a good example of the public-private partnership.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take a moment and just reiterate what's previously been said, and thank, there's countless people, too many to name in this time frame, to just say thank you to everybody that's been involved along this way. I appreciate everybody that's already spoken here this evening. This is one of those moments right now, tonight, when we have an opportunity to vote, that when I was on the campaign trail that I wanted to see to come to fruition. This is one of those when you're in the car with your kids, with your grandkids, potentially your great-grandkids, and you can look and you can say, I was part of that. I helped to save that. This is the preservation that we're looking for. This is what we need to do. This is what our citizens have asked for. This is the job that needs to be done right now. The hard work's been done. And so, again, as we make this, and Eric, just to confirm, when we say that at this point there's no additional cost to Franklin residents as this is going to occur through no new funds are going to be required, it's covered.
Well, you're going to have to work through the exact funding. Will really be something that we finalize as we work through our capital investment program.
Right.
We've got available cash resources. We are also anticipating a general obligation debt issue first part of next year. This could be a part, or some of this could be worked into that. Even within that debt service, you can pay that through your hotel motel tax. You've got parkland funds that also could help with this. So it's going to be some blend of those, but it also depends on other projects you're doing and what's the right match or blend of resources to get those projects done. We always look at what's the most efficient way to fund and deliver a project. There's clearly capacity to help us do that. And, you're prioritizing this now because the opportunity's now, but it will be likely a blend of cash and probably work a component of it into our upcoming debt issue that we'll do first part of '24.
Excellent, okay. Well, again, I think this is great. I know that there's again, a lot of people involved, but this preservation piece is extremely important to me personally. And I know that many other members of the board support that as well.
Alderman Berger.
Real quick, there's a lot of people in this room tonight, Ed and Rod and Kay, and I think Pam Lewis is back there, Pam, and the Bacons and Tom Miller, who's no longer with us, and a lot of people who stepped up to save the battlefield and the friggin' battlefield. And I was coming into office when that happened and when Harlansdale happened. I never got to cast my vote for those two, but I was really excited to see that. I was part of a bit of Harlansdale, but this is really an important part and piece of our property here for in perpetuity for saving our beautiful landscape. And the first antebellum trail into Franklin all the way down to Alabama came through Franklin Road. So I'm going to put, you know me, I said we can, Friends of Franklin Park, thank you for all the work and hard work you do all the time to raise money and to save properties and do different things for our parks. So without you, I mean, we would be a day late and a dollar short always, because we need that help from all of you. So I'm going to put out there, and this is hopefully going to be recorded for some time, that the people watching at home, and this is a very generous community. We give a lot of our time. We saved a theater, for heaven's sakes, in the recession. So, and that was $8 or $9 million during the recession. People said it couldn't be done, but yeah, Ed's sitting there shaking his head. It was done. We all got together. All the aldermen on the board got together, and we went out and raised money, and we helped buy the seats and do different things that we could do, and it happened. So it's a generous community. I want to put this out here for people listening at home and the people who are generous in this community. I'm looking for the first $100,000 to come in. You can write that check for $100,000. I'll help you if you don't know how to spell that. That's a good one to write. So Friends of Franklin Park, 1368 Eastern Flank Circle, Franklin 37064. 1368 Eastern Flank Circle, Franklin, Tennessee 37064. If anybody listens to this on YouTube afterwards and you don't live in Franklin, but you have a heart to save precious property in a historic city, you can send in your checks and send them to Franklin and make them out to Friends of Franklin Park and put on there Creekside. That's all you need to put on there. And when you all get those checks, I want you to call us and tell us that they're pouring in. Because Rod was telling me, he said, people are very generous here. But somehow they just don't give a lot of money to preservation of land. Well, we've got to change that. We've got to change it. I'm writing you a check tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, the next item on the agenda has 15 slides, and we're not going to do it. So we're going to thank everybody for being here, and we're going to end this session.
Could I make one final comment? If
Go
you
ahead.
do approve this, and I recognize that is to come, one, certainly like to thank everyone. But second, I would like to make a public comment about Franklin Preservation Partners. Constant reference is made to Franklin Preservation Partners as if it was an anomalous group. This group has all taken individually a huge risk. I happen to be the manager, but there are 8 of us that have operated as partners, and each of us is equally liable for the $9.3 million, and I'm going to name them. It's Tyler Berry, Lloyd Crockett, E. Slick Daniel, Greg Gamble, Calvin Lehue, Tony McAllister, and Bob Ravner. And I just hope that you will recognize that Alderman Berger, as you note, these are people that have committed to land preservation, and I think the group collectively has to be recognized.
One more thing, Mayor, because that's right. We didn't talk about, though, in this memorandum of understanding, there's a net profit realized by partners from the transaction shall be equally paid or donated as the circumstances direct back to the city and the church. The public needs to hear that too. Those individuals you just named, any profit, net profit from this is going back to the city and the church, not in your pockets. You did this out of the goodness for the city. The public needs to hear that. It needs to be loud and clear.
Our objective is to begin the city an opportunity to acquire this land in perpetuity. Our objective personally is to recover our cost, no more. And so we hope we will recover our cost, however.
Well, let applause indicate the end of this session.